February 10th here on Sekeres and Price. Blake Price alongside guest host Patrick Johnston, back for another tour here. Matt's away until Thursday. It's coming to you from the Nation Network studios built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center downtown. And this program, as always, brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres and Price. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Use the promo code NATION. That's Nation. And whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. PJ, a pleasure. Thanks for doing this. How was your weekend, sir?
It was good, fun. Obviously, I picked the Eagles to win, so feel good about that. And obviously, big Canucks win Saturday night, and vibes are good, and winning is good, and everyone's happy, even if Quinn Hughes isn't playing, and Elias Pettersson, hasn't scored a goal in a while, but looked a lot better Saturday night. So, yeah, we're things are good, and it's sunny out. Blake, it's a beautiful day outside.
Still cold as stink, but it is sunny out.
I'm done with the cold. Bring me back miserable rain. I'm that kind of guy. It's enough's enough. Enough. I don't like ice. I don't like ice.
This isn't fun snow anymore. Fun snow is fun.
Yeah.
Hard crusted white.
Oh,
no need.
Yeah.
Go away.
Yeah, you should see my kid walking to school this morning as we crunched along in the crunchy snow on the backfield behind the school as we walked over to the school. Just not happy about this anymore.
I think we got it for another week here. We'll see. Today's Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Nothing handles the crusty white snow quite like your Surrey Mitsubishi, by the way. After a 6-1-1 run and all these changes, are you convinced the Canucks will make the playoffs? Yes or no? Again, I'll put in lights the word convinced, which to me means it's a guarantee for you in your brain. Patrick Johnston, first go with this, yes or no?
Yes. I saw enough this past week, that this team has got back to its A game on defense, which was always likely, no matter what was going wrong offensively. But there were enough things, especially on Saturday, I would say, obviously only 2 goals, but there was enough sort of inclinations towards the east-west stuff that the coaching staff has been looking for. It's not just that pass that Elias Pettersson made to Philip Hronek, but it was the way they were dynamic on the rush. I mean, we've seen Philip Hedel's instincts are just to go hard at the attacking zone. That is, in general, what the coaches have been wanting from this team, despite what people may believe. There was enough there, and the breakouts are improved, and whether Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, stays in the lineup or not, but the way he's playing, the way Marcus Pettersson has already contributed to this team, the next level game. Honestly, Tyler Myers is playing some of the best hockey of his Canucks career. Yeah, you can't lean on that given the age and all that, but the way he's playing, Philip Hronek finally has found his fastball again, and at the right time. There's just enough in that, and of course Thatcher Demko, assuming he's fine, but even with Kevin Lankinen, there's just enough stuff happening. Plus, there's the reality of the Calgary Flames. The Flames have never been able to pull away for a reason, because they're just not good enough.
Well, that's where I'll jump in. I'll say yes as well, only because and Matt and I were sort of battling a little bit on the terms used, and you were involved in this a little bit. Shall we revisit
overwhelming and underwhelming?
Well, right. It's sort of along those lines, in the fact that no matter how bad the Canucks got during their darkest days of this season, they were always right there. And God, at some points, Patrick, they felt like the worst team in the National Hockey League when we watched them.
Yeah.
And yet, they refused to sink any further in the standings. They go on this little run, and it is little. It's only an 8-game sample size with a couple of losses in that fold. They go on this run. Yeah, the Flames are nipping at their heels, 3 points back, but it is 3 points, so you get a little bit of insurance there. But they are 6 up on Utah. They've got a game in hand on Utah. Yeah. They're 8 up on the Blues. They've got a game in hand on the Blues.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a 9-team race for the 8 playoff spots in the Western Conference as we see it. And I think we're all waiting for the Calgary Flames house of cards to come crashing down.
Yeah. I mean, 2 points. I mean, Kings have 2 games in hand, but 2 points back at the Kings, obviously the Kings have had a better defensive season, but the Canucks have scored more goals than LA, if you can believe it. The position the Canucks have stumbled themselves into is still not a bad position. It's not what you would want them to be, given that they are the defending division champions. They are 9 points back of the division leading Oilers, to be clear. I don't think that's a difference they're going to be able to overhaul unless they go on an incredibly dramatic run, which I suppose isn't impossible, but you shouldn't predict those kinds of things.
Our friends at Surrey Mitsubishi have a special program exclusive to you, the Sekeres and Price listener, viewer only. If you've been turned down for financing at other dealerships, Surrey Mitsubishi will assign a dedicated representative who is committed to get you approved through their in-house finance program. Jessica from Surrey Mitsubishi will assist in getting you approved on a new Mitsubishi. Bad credit, negative equity on your current car, Jessica will apply the special program for you and do everything possible to make sure you are approved. Email Jessica at surreymitsubishi.com. Make sure you mention Sekeres and Price to get in on this program. Some conditions apply. Surrey Mitsubishi, 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey. That's the broad brush stuff that we just talked about. Our top story today presented by Yellow Dog Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits, Neighborhood Brewing, and Foolish Wine. Here's some of the fine print. Quinn Hughes deciding yesterday he is not going to go to represent the United States at the Four Nations face-off. He will stay and get healthy for your Vancouver Canucks. That's a huge decision, PJ, in the Canucks' favor. Club before country wins the day, and I don't know that I would have predicted it.
I don't know. I had no actual intel on it, but my instincts were from the moment we saw him flinch at the end of that Dallas game, I started thinking, I don't know if it's going to happen. Now, it sounds like the injury is a lot better than perhaps we might have feared when we saw the way he was moving. I worried it was a hamstring or groin or some sort of core thing, and it's not. It's his oblique, which is near. And, he'll be fine. And it sounds like he'll be fine. And you'll give him a couple more weeks of rest. I mean, obviously he will skate, but you give him a couple weeks of rest and just a chance to heal. That will be big. I mean, to be honest, that's why this 2-week break is actually so great for, every team in the NHL, obviously, but just a chance to refresh. The numbers have been clear forever that after about game 65, players' bodies start to just completely, utterly wear out because they haven't been able to catch up on what they were doing in the first place, exposing themselves to further injury as they're already injured. So getting 2 weeks of chance to recover here, listen, he wanted to go play for Team USA. But in the end, they had to make a decision. That's why Rick Tocchet before the game said, listen, we're down to a question of hours. They're going to have to make a decision. They obviously, I don't think, going to declare the roster till today, till to Monday. But, in the end, they had to make some calls, get some people on board. And it didn't surprise me given where all the dialogue, obviously was hopefully better. But, you go back to Tuesday when I asked Rick Tocchet, how has he improved, if at all, from Friday, and he said slightly. And so, the initial recovery was slight, and he's obviously improved over the week where he's able to skate hard on Saturday before the game, hoping maybe even to play, but he was not going to play. And the moment you saw him not playing for the Canucks, you started going, I thought Jay Patton and I thought about this even in game on Saturday, maybe, could you see him maybe sit out Thursday's game against Finland and then play Saturday against Canada? But in the end, they need all the healthy guys they can, and he's made the decision that he wants to just focus on getting fit and healthy, and the Canucks are thankful for that.
You said you had the inkling. Pretend this is next year, and we're going into the Olympics game, the Olympics tournament. Does that inkling hold true, or do you think he moves heaven and earth to play?
Well, I think you're right. I think it's obviously much more difficult decision. Like, there's absolutely no doubt about it. You're absolutely right about that. The other thing on this is that the roster rules are going to be different. Like, Olympic roster rules are different. You are able to bring more subs than you are for this tournament. Like, that is the other thing in this, is that they clearly were trying to avoid the idea of guys just sitting around never to play, because those guys, I get it. I think we get it. It's one thing to be in the lineup; it's a whole other thing to be a bench. Just a depth guy who's never going to play. You'd rather have that break. I think. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
So, the dynamic is different for an Olympics. There are guys that travel to an Olympics and never play and still have the time of their lives, and it's the biggest honor
that happens too. Yeah.
I'm trying to think who it was talking about this. Or yeah, I think there was another podcast talking about this the other day. But just like 2014, you look at the taxi squad guys, Mario St. Louis and guys like that, guys who just were never going to play. Great players, and they showed up every day to practice. They had a great time. They lived the time of their lives. So if that's an option for in a similar circumstance, sure. I think Quinn Hughes probably says, yeah, I think I can go now. And then it becomes a question of what Team USA wants. It's that's it.
Well, if you think that he's not going to play till game 4 of the Olympic tournament, then you bring him, right? And you give him an extra week off.
Well, that's it. Yeah,
exactly. The other thing and this is obvious to some perhaps, but I should put it in lights anyway, he's missing the Four Nations face-off for this oblique injury. But the body doesn't only heal that. The body heals everything, including, the nicked hand that he has that, is still... got the apparatus on it from time to time.
Yeah.
But the rest of it too. The man probably burns, 20,000 calories a day or something.
Oh my God.
The fact that he gets to put his feet up a little more than he would normally.
Yeah.
The rest of his body regenerates over this fortnight as well. So, it is just a massive victory here for the Canucks, given how much they use him, that he doesn't end up playing even the 3 or 4 games that he's on schedule to currently play. So it's really big.
Without giving too much away, I do have a story coming later this week about Hughes, and I actually talked to Elias Pettersson a little bit about him post-game on Saturday, and I said, what's the thing that most stands out about why Quinn's so successful? And he just said, Pettersson paused, thought about it, said, start talking about his diet. The point being that when Hughes is focused, no one is more focused than him. Mm-hmm. So in his recovery, these 2 weeks, quote unquote, resting, he's still going to be doing everything he can do to make himself be, as close to 100% as he can be when everything resumes a couple weeks from now.
Before we leave the subject of absences, we're going to get back to the Four Nations rosters in a little bit here, but are the playoffs better this year? Because even more so than in an Olympic year where there's, much of the league is playing in the Olympics.
Right.
This is pretty select company here.
Yeah.
Do the playoffs get better? And I'm talking the third round maybe, where otherwise you are 82 games and 3 playoff rounds deep and withered into a skeleton at that point. Do you think we see better late round playoffs because they've had this break?
Yeah, and like I said, there's a mountain of evidence that shows after game 65.
Yeah.
It's that repetitive because they keep playing, right? Like your body begins to break down because these, you're not joking when they're eating all, the caloric demands of playing hockey. Yeah. There's a reason why they just eat everything they can after a game because they are trying to get calories back into their body. It is a very, very difficult challenge. And you're right. Like most of these guys are going to have a break. There's a reason why they brought the bye week in, right? Like the bye week was for this purpose, was to give the teams a bit of a rest so that they could just kind of catch their breath, literally. I think your theory is really spot on. Obviously there's a whole bunch of stars playing here, but
it's still a pretty exclusive group. We're talking a couple players on each team.
Yeah. At 80 guys or 80 some guys. Like it's the Rangers have 4 guys on Team USA. But, the Canucks now only have 3 guys dealing with it, two guys.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Those teams are going to be going, well, Vegas is kind of going to think, and they're like, it's Alex Pietrangelo, let's just get himself healthy, right? Like, that's the same kind of thing. Like, any of the teams they are actually going to the Canucks are benefiting from this in the weirdest way that Quinn Hughes just gets
I agree.
recovery.
Yeah.
Like, he's among their group of players who are just going to be feeling better when things come back.
Yellow Dog has the Squirrel Chaser Hazy Pale Ale Tall Packs on special for the month of February, the 4-packs. Look for it on sale at private and government liquor stores. So that's the news on Hughes' injury. As for Thatcher Demko, well, the good news is he was named second star of the week, which sort of dovetails into the bad news of him being injured as well, because it makes it all the more sad for Canucks fans. Look at that, 0.46 goals against average, 985 save percentage, and a shutout in the week. It was everything that we remember Thatcher Demko to be. The season-long save percentage starting to flirt with 900 again, which once it gets to that point, we know the save percentages have plummeted in the NHL this season. Once he gets to 900, you're really feeling good about where he's at. The question is, what's he like on the other side of these 2 weeks? Is it going to be enough, just these 2 weeks?
Well, yeah. We don't quite know what he's dealing with. Not his knee. Rick Tocchet wanted to be clear. Something that happened in the game, not during warm-up. Rick Tocchet wanted to be clear when I asked him. You hope so. There are very few clues at this point. Certainly the way he played last week and, deserved recognition. Obviously, the same percentage is not sustainable. Let's be clear. But that's not the point. The point was it wasn't just that he stopped everything he saw. It was that he made some really big saves in really big moments. And
athletic acrobatic saves too, which I've been wincing for a long time, but now these split saves, he's looking normal.
Yeah, and that's what they needed. And obviously the technique looks better and all that. And I'm not an expert, and I defer to people who understand this better. But you would say the big moment, big save aspect of it all that we see, the fact he was doing those, and those saves weren't just because he was scrambling to make a second save off a ridiculously terrible rebound, right? Like, that's the other thing, is don't be fooled by the spectacular saves. Think about why the saves were happening. Of course, were times where that meant the Canucks were having a defensive breakdown, which happens. But the fact is that he bailed his team out, and he hadn't been doing that. And to me, that was the most positive sign out of all of this. Now, of course, you now sit and wait, and we'll see if he is ready to go in 2 weeks' time. And you certainly, for the Canucks' sake, hope so, because they need that guy. They need all hands on deck. This is going to be quite the push to the playoffs. And as I think, we'll discuss with Darren Dreger later, there's an opportunity to add some interesting things to this team.
Potentially.
They want to do it. They want to do it with purpose.
Lankinen came in though and was his Lankinonian self, and it was spectacular at times, particularly late with the power play for Toronto. But my goodness, where would they be without him? And you talk about the two guys at the Four Nations. He's one of them. I don't think he plays, but the Canucks can't afford him to get injured at the Four Nations. That's for sure.
No, I think we're pretty sure that Lankinen is there as number 3, but you never know. Like, short tournament, things happen. Maybe they have crisis in net, and they're like, let's turn to the guy who's been solid almost all year for the Vancouver Canucks.
He had a massive fist pump at the end of that game.
Yeah,
it looked larger than appropriate given early February game.
Sure.
I'm going to read a lot into it, Patrick. I don't know if that's right of me too or not. It was probably like, hey, I got airdropped into this game and I still won it, and I made some big saves late. It's probably mostly that, but it might have been other things as well. Hey, the Canucks are on a roll. Everybody knows 6-1-1. That's the most readily available stat. But as J-Pat has pointed out, since they started this run, first place team in the league. Yeah. Nobody's got to 13 points in that stretch. I mean, that's the kind of thing that does put you back into the conversation of our poll question, but even beyond that, like, how real is this? Like, how repeatable, particularly when you look at the style of play? And I think those are all still valid questions here, Patrick. Is what they're doing now repeatable on a long term and even buildable? Like, can you start to score a little bit more but still be as airtight defensively as you are? These are the questions that I still have, and they can't answer right now.
Well, I wrote a story going into the playoffs last year looking at sort of who really advances. And it's never the teams that are the most defensive in the league, right? There is a little bit of risk. You have to accept some damage defensively. It's clear.
Yeah.
And right now, if you look at expected goals, and public expected goals is a flawed stat for a bunch of reasons we've discussed before, but quickly it's because you don't know basically the orientation of the situation when the shot gets taken, where the pass came from, what the goalie's doing, if there's a screen, on and on and on. But what it is useful in telling you is essentially who is generating quality shots. And we know where, in terms of volume and location. And, the better the shot, all teams understand this now, that there are certain places you just don't shoot from. You don't waste shots from the boards. Be hesitant to shoot from the point. We know that the Canucks like to shoot from the point. Those are low value shots. That the best shots are in that home plate area in front of the net between the dots. Essentially, it's bottom half of the slot. According to National Stats, Canucks have the second fewest expected goals against, which is great. That's a sign. I mean, that matches our eye test. We know that. You saw it on Saturday, right? Like the Leafs would, not a great rush team, tried to work the puck out from down below behind the net, and the Canucks just don't let that happen. Like they just don't give that away. And it was a masterclass in defending, and that was part of the reason why Kevin Lehtonen had a good night, was because the quality of chances he was facing were not as difficult. But offensively, we can see it. This team has struggled all season to do that. And certainly the additions of likes of Phil Hedl and Drew O'Connor have brought a different dimension to the attack. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We'll see if Elias Pettersson, certainly the Canucks, their whole game plan was designed to have Elias Pettersson and JT Miller bringing it on offense, and neither was this year. A far cry from last year, far cry from the year before. Pettersson obviously stumbled in the second half last season, but at the All-Star break was on a 100-point pace, which he had done the year before. JT Miller obviously had a 100-point season last year. So it's not like the sort of building blocks weren't there, right? It was more than anything down to player performance. And that's the question now, is will Pettersson, who is now clearly the number one center on this team, will he be able to lead his teammates to where they need to be? What will the Canucks do with the empty cap space? Will they keep, will they find another centerman? Will they do something with that? Can they build this offense up into being more than it's been so far, which is purely a Quinn Hughes exercise? But you see the way Filip Hronek has played this past week. You see the way that the Canucks have moved the puck out of their own zone better, and you kind of go, okay, maybe this story is changing. But so far, to date, this is a team that has been very good at defending and been absolutely terrible at generating offense. And if they are going to be better, they are going to have to open it up a little bit, I think.
I looked at the 6-1-1 stretch and expected goals. They got the expected goals for percentage above 50 on only 3 occasions.
Yeah.
One of them in a loss. Remember how great they played versus the Wings and didn't get the 2 points.
Yeah.
But they're within arm's reach of 50%, and I mean high 40s on 3 others.
Yeah.
So there's only 2 where they're in the 30s. San Jose, which you need to explain why it went down like that. And then the Capitals game, which I actually played pretty well at.
Yeah.
And, so when you cross-reference it with Corsi, they were above 50% in Corsi 5 of the games of the 8, and that starts to flesh it out just a little bit more. So I guess my question is, have they been attacked? Like, you think of the 3 Pettersson posts, was that against Toronto?
Yeah.
Each of the Petterssons with a post. I mean, could you make the argument they probably could have had a few more goals along the way here as well, earned a few more goals than they actually ultimately scored as well?
Yeah, I mean, you frame those 2 goals against each other, right? 2 games. The Sharks game and the Leafs game. There's a lot of similarities in it, but the difference was the Canucks were better against the Leafs. They played down to the Sharks. They did not, they're not a tempo team, but they definitely the style of play was not what they wanted. And I will. I think their first period and third period against the Leafs was outstanding. Their second period showed the problems that they had this season. They had a lot of puck that period, but they were hesitant to make they would break out and rush. There were a number of rushes. Like Kiefer Sherwood looked off a cross-ice pass. It would have been a difficult cross-ice pass, but you're leading the rush. Have the confidence to hit Elias Pettersson on the far side of the ice, give him a chance to do something with the puck instead he kind of play it safe. And I believe the rhetoric that we've heard from Rick Tocchet time and again. I mean, we had a great chat with him I think it was last week. Ended up lingering and he's great on these post scrum, do some X's and O's stuff. And we talked a bit about, the zone entries and what Hedl was doing and what hasn't been the case. And it was mostly just the way, it was more than anything is the way they moved up the ice. And the good news is on Saturday, we saw them moving up the ice much better. They're still in a work in progress, but to take the risk off the rush. I mean, I'll give Kiefer Sherwood a bit of benefit of the doubt. He is still relatively new to what Tocchet is asking his guys to do. And if you think about it, he had half a season with most of the team last year. He had half a season with them the season before to sort of start setting the baseline, comes in, says, this is what we want to do. Here's how we're going to do it. And they executed it to a T last year. They turned over a lot of the roster this season. And of course they've struggled. There were a lot of struggles. JT Miller struggled. Elias Pettersson struggled. So when your top players aren't playing well, it's no wonder that guys like Sherwood aren't quite sure really how to execute on things. I mean, this is mostly me just kind of lining things up. Nobody's actually said this to me, to be clear. There wasn't a disconnect more than it, but we can hear what Rick Tocchet has talked about for a great while now, which is that, in many ways they kept talking about the message. He talked about his assistant coaches and how they were trying to essentially build the game plan as they were speaking and having perhaps some difficulties connecting with the room. And so that's why, again, I come back to the point that I've made it was post game. These guys were in a much better place. I think they're doing a lot better. And it's just mentally, I think they're in a good place. It's going to be see whether they can execute now when they come back.
Yeah. So let's build on that thought, because they've ticked a lot of boxes, 2 gaudy 3-game winning streaks here in this 8-game stretch, but they've at least strung those together. They've gone the back-to-back home wins route finally.
Yeah.
That's come to pass as well. And it's one thing for fans to buy into the optimism and good vibes because you've gone 6-1-1. Question is, in that room, do they believe in it? Do they see it as sort of a new feel? And you having been there, a good barometer, like how, and they've been on the road for a lot of this, but just in the last couple here, what have you seen that leads you to believe that all these trades were successful in the room, if not on the ice just yet? And it has been on the ice to a small degree already with the 6-1-1 record, but off the ice, was mission accomplished here? Should they be out there on the aircraft carrier with mission accomplished in the background here? Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford.
On a different show, Chris Higgins once told me that you have to believe 90% of what your coach is saying. And I think, given how Chris's career ended, we knew what he was referring to. And, Willie's reign did not end well.
No.
But on the whole, you have, then the point stands, right? Like, your coach has to be saying stuff that makes sense. And certainly there was a connection last year. The Canucks played the way their coaches wanted them to play. They were having struggles with that this year. And I don't think it was a question of dissent. I think it was just an energy and enthusiasm, as you were kind of implying, that they just weren't firing on all cylinders mentally or emotionally.
Well, the distractions were there too. So, even if they, in their heart of hearts, believed in the game plan, there was other stuff at play. Yeah.
And, they want to, listen, they themselves will admit to you that there was a lot going on, right? They've been cautious about talking about it, but like the noise is there for a reason. And it wasn't just because they were playing badly, because they were not, it was a disjointed unit. And the hope now is that they will be much more on the same page. And I winning breeds a lot of that, right? Like that's the biggest thing. This team was a bit of a chicken and the egg situation, but certainly, JT Miller needed a fresh start. Everyone understood this, right? Like it was not going to be here, that the future was not here, despite the fact that this was a place he had been, committed to and wanted to stay. And, his family was very, very tied in here. This is where they wanted to be. They chose this place, but it had gone wrong. And we're going to obviously going to still try to keep figuring that one out. I'm sure the story will come out sooner rather than later, or some of it will anyway. We're going to have to keep asking questions and seeing what people want to say. To be clear, that's how the journalism works. You may hear things, but you still need people to actually say them. But like the vibes are just better. Like, I just can't be understated how in exchanges, I mean, the post game, like it.
Was the post-game process different?
One of the frustrations for us, and people don't care about the media's problems, and I won't belabor this point.
No, but we're using it as a barometer
but as a barometer, like, you'd go in and the mood and the light, and the guys were walking around with clouds over their heads, and you can just tell, like, the sort of, oh God, and more of this, whereas, like I wrote about it, Elias Pettersson did his scrum, and then talked to a couple different reporters one-on-one, and just And, I asked him a couple questions for a story I'm working on. And like, just, he just was, you could just tell he was, I mean, obviously he played well, right? The team won, but you could just tell that emotionally he is in a new, he seems to be in a new place. Whereas he had just been walking around with there was no scowl, right? Like he just was in a difficult spot. And now he's got to deliver, right? Like that's the thing. Good. You're happy that he seems to be happy. Now he's got to deliver. And if you're a betting man, I would say he's going to deliver because he has before. But we'll see. There are sort of technique questions still to be, whether he can shoot and skate and break through. I mean, Frankie Corrado had the great point the other day when we had him on the show, talking about he just isn't separating himself from defenders. Defenders seem to understand how to get on and get in front of him, get in the mix, and keep him from pulling away. But the mentality is there, and you talk to. I mean, I think it was last Tuesday was our first chance to really kind of see those, or at least my first chance to see those guys. Obviously, they've been the new team and players have been there on Sunday, but I made a point. I talked to Marcus Pettersson. We talked about what he brings and what the Canucks seem to want from him. I talked to Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, both DPDs back to back. And he's a kid that he's being careful and cautious, but we talked about making it in the NHL and what he had seen through 3 games, and obviously the challenges of that. Drew O'Connor, nice friendly guy. Philip Hedl, like all of them feeling good, happy to be in a place that wanted them. That more than anything is what stands out. These are players that the Canucks in the end wanted to add to the lineup. Philip Hedl is not talent-wise going to be what JT Miller was, but he brings a different element, and it's an element the Canucks knew they needed. Same with O'Connor. So, the vibes are just better, and we'll see where they lead. I mean, like I said, I think I told you, Phil Pronik was, he's never been the most most sort of willing to chat. That's just a choice he's made, and I think it's just kind of his personality anyway. But he stood at scrum, and I asked him a different. I pulled him. I just afterwards, hey, can I ask you one quick? Yeah, sure. He's not big on descriptive language, shall we say? But he was ready to have some conversation and talk a bit about Quinn Hughes and what's going on in his own game, and it just everything. Everything kind of adds up. These guys are feeling looser and happier, and you certainly hope that carries on.
The fact that they've done a lot of this work here going into the break without Hughes is also impressive, because that's like a blockbuster trade on day one, presuming that Hughes jumps back into the lineup. Roenick and Myers, though, have carried a lot of the load here with him gone. And it seems like it was not that long ago, measured in days, not months, that we were saying they need a top 4 right shot defenseman. Given all the other changes that we've seen, given that Marcus Pettersson has come down and, solidified the left side for sure, like they have other needs here, PJ. Is the right shot top 4 defenseman on hold? Like, should we just tell them to put that on the way back burner because they've got bigger needs, perhaps?
I mean, I suppose maybe that's part
given
of
the cost. Like, it's going to cost a lot. So given the cost, do that.
Yeah, but I mean, if you've got Carson Soucy playing on your right now, like he's fine. But and I think he being asked to do less has done better. But nonetheless, you look, okay, what's the optimal setup? And would you like a right shot guy over him? Would you like Tyler Myers realistically on a third pairing with Derek Forbort? I can see, and you look at the cap space, as much as the Canucks might want to bring a centerman, do they want to bring a defenseman in? Like that, I don't think just because you've added one defenseman doesn't mean you want to go and add another one. Like, if you really look at it, think how strong the defense core of most teams that really make it are. The Oilers last year were maybe a bit of an exception, right? The depth, they didn't have the depth, but they don't, they can get by because they got 2 of the best forwards in the world, right? But you look at all the other squads, look at the Panthers, look at the Golden Knights, like look at the Avalanche and their prime, although the Avalanche are a little top heavy right now. But you look at the top teams in the league and how they've been constructed, the Lightning, right? Look at how they've been constructed, and they are constructed from the back out. And so I find myself wondering, is that what the Canucks are, if they really are going to go for it, is that where they're going to put in their high-priced player that they could add because of all this cap space. I find myself wondering. That's just that is something that a right shot defenseman. I mean, that is something they've been talking about for a year. Marcus Pettersson, they've been talking about since last summer, but they've been talking about a right shot defenseman since last year. And
I mean, can you imagine Tyler Myers as the right shot third pair defenseman? Like,
that's a lot better. I mean,
like that's pretty spectacular. Had a great year,
but
yeah,
imagine a new partner for Quinn Hughes, a new partner for Marcus Pettersson. Like that's kind of where we're going with this. That's where you're getting, and I am fascinated to see what the Canucks end up doing here.
I see the super chat from a handle, JT Miller. Don't think it's the real one. Thank you for the super chat benefiting the BC Mental Health Foundation. Thoughts on third pair right-handed defenseman? Soucy won't last there. I think we just addressed that, JTM, so we don't need to go any further on that. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, like, with this break, do you think Carson Soucy's traded in this break, or is this going right to the deadline? Do you think he's not traded at all? Given like he's again on the third pair, he should be able to do that, and he's the kind of player that on other years the Canucks would be gleeful in acquiring before the playoffs, right? So, what do you think the future holds here?
Well, it's been such an odd year for him, and obviously, we all sort of assume he dealt with some kind of injury in the first half, and then he's struggled with confidence, struggled with decision making. Again, is this a guy that just will benefit from a new vibe, like in the room? I mean, and I still go back to Jim Rutherford's long-standing pattern, which is to add more defensemen than he needs, not get rid of defensemen. Now, if moving Soucy is in a move that brings you in another top-end defenseman, sure, there you go. Especially if you're feeling good about Elias Pettersson, and I think they really are. He is going to change the discussion here a lot, and they're very high, obviously, on Victor Mancini, who is a bit of a project player right now. But in the long run, let's be clear, Victor Mancini has a lot of work to do to take over a right side spot, especially if Tom Willander makes it. That's the other factor, right? Like Tom Willander, we all kind of understand, is probably going to sign after his BU season ends, right? Whenever that is. So I don't think he necessarily is a guy that steps into the lineup right away, but if you're feeling good about him, you're going to try to find out. He's a guy that's going to play a factor down the road. Mancini may just get blocked out, but it's good they feel good about him, because you can never have too many defensemen. But right now, at this point, headed toward the playoffs, which the Canucks definitely want to be and believe they should be, and we all think they should be, veteran defensemen who can be steady hands. That's the part about me, about all this Soucy chatter, that I do find myself being a bit skeptical of, because this is not a management team that has traded away useful defensemen. They have traded away defensemen, to be clear, but not useful defensemen. So yeah, it's a good question. Listen,
because he is useful. It's a great word, and it seems diminishing, but
he's very useful. Yeah. And as I've said more than once on this program, last season he was far better than any of us anticipated he would be. He was outstanding last season. He didn't even have to be that player. He's been nothing like that player this season. The Canucks really could use him returning to that.
Yeah,
something even a shade of that. So yeah, in hockey, as I always say, you never say never. You never say never. So we'll see how this all shakes out.
Presuming they do make the playoffs, somebody in the first round's getting injured, and everybody shuffles up. And if your guy off the bench is Soucy rather than Juleson, like, that looks pretty good. That's
it. I mean, that's exactly it. Like, what are you actually trying to assemble here? Like, who's your next man up? Like, if that is what you're thinking about, you're gaming out the next man up situation, right? And the next man up, you would like to have it be a very competent Carson Soucy or something.
Or if the bright lights are too bright for Elias Pettersson in the first round, then you bring in the veteran guy.
Well, that's it. Elias Pettersson's 20 years old.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild. But it's great. It's a great sign for him. It's a great sign for him. He's going to have almost certainly a long NHL career here, but he's still only 20 years old.
Let's get to Four Nations face-off. We'll get to Pettersson in a second, because there's a little bit of news there. But Canada's lines were unveiled, and yet it was Power Play 1 that probably stole the show here. The names that they trotted out, if you are so stupid as to commit an infraction against Team Canada: Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Kale McCarr on D and Sam Reinhart, all due respect, Sam Reinhart, who has been tremendous the last 3 years. He almost seems like one that doesn't belong in that group because the rest of them are absolute stratospheric superstars. Reinhart certainly played at that level for 3 years, but nevertheless, that is unbelievable.
Well, and Sid playing net front is the way they had them set up in practice. It's just amazing to think about the possibilities in this lineup. Like just Crosby and McDavid. We've been wanting to see this for years.
Let's show the actual lines here, and Mike, if you've got it there. So here's the forward lines. It'll be Reinhart, McDavid, Marner, Stone, Crosby, McKinnon. I think they'll be okay. Third line, Point with Jarvis, and I don't love the bottom six, to be honest. Like I think there is a drop off. Like it's there. Like I know these guys, but
I love that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know, Blake. I kind of love that tax-free line on the fourth line there, right? Like
the tax-free line. That's good.
It's been a long time since we saw the Lightning, but Brandon Hagel, we saw why he was on the radar for Team Canada when the Canucks played against Cirelli. We know very well, quality two-way guy, and Sam Bennett. Yeah. Sam Bennett was a warrior for the Panthers in the playoffs. I really am excited about that line. I try not to get into the who should be in or out debate. Once the roster's there, I really like the look of this line. But the third line, I can get a little bit of it, but like Brad Marchand, as odious he is a personality in this town. Like there's another Captain Canada guy, right? Like he's always showed up for Canada.
And you do need a disturber of some sort, right?
Absolutely.
Especially against Brady Tkachuk and Matthew Tkachuk, like JT Miller. They're going to be annoying, the Americans and others as well. You do need an antidote to that as well. The defense looks pretty good as well, obviously for Canada. But let's there's a quick look at the defense there, and they keep the Avs together, which is nice.
Yeah. Sanheim is your seventh guy. Like it's there's a lot to like there.
No number there for Doughty. He chose 89, by the way, which is a little weird for a defenseman.
Well, it's a new era. Hey, is it any weirder than Sergachev being 98? Like
it's true. That one is a weird one.
We're a lot well past it. We're are you a low numbers, classic numbers guy? Is that what you're telling me? Or?
For D, no, I don't mind the 44s and 77s, like the sort of the traditional defense high numbers, but I don't know. 89's
that's a world we're in now, man. Like it's just that's the world. I mean, if Ian Cole, who's kind of as standard and boring, not boring, but it's kind of standard and like down the middle as they get, is able to go to 82. Like anything's possible.
As for Sweden, I'll ask you this: is Elias Pettersson? They have it listed here. Is he the top line center for Team Sweden?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Forsberg and Kempe. I mean. Like, what are the other options there? I don't mind what they've got as the third line. Eriksson X got Bratt and Lucas Raymond, but Nylander's the best winger.
I think it's a hell of a line. There's a hell of a trio there, right? Like Nylander, I suppose you could maybe put him with Pettersson, but Nylander is Zibanejad. I mean, that's exciting. There's a lot I like about this team. I
like the forward set.
What's that, the forward set? Like, Nyquist and Arvidsson on your fourth line, like it's just it is a classic Swedish roster. Just every one of those players is a quality, high hockey IQ. Like they just beat you because they're relentless and they don't make mistakes. Obviously you would like to see Elias Pettersson take it to a next level because the Canucks really need him to. But yeah, it's a lineup that always. I mean, the Swedes are always there, and there's a reason why, and it's because they are always able to put lineups like this on the ice.
So, if you're a gambling man here, would you rather 2 weeks of rest for Elias Pettersson, where he does some mental work, sees the sports that you want him to play, spark some joy again? What if he goes with 1 assist in 3 games and they are eliminated, don't make the final? What happens?
Well, then you're just where you always were. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Okay.
I think he's a guy that needs to play his way out of this. I think that's the bottom line. I think he needs to find his feet. I don't think it was a coincidence that Rick Tocchet dropped that line to us pregame on Saturday, saying he had a meeting with Pettersson and they watched video and he didn't have to say anything. Pettersson says, "Oh my God, I got to move my feet." Right? Like, I don't think that was a coincidence because we saw him move his feet against the Leafs. There were multiple times. He's still not hitting that top end he once hit, and he's still not hammering the puck the way you'd want him to with abandon. But there were multiple moments where the puck came to him, in the Canucks' zone, and he accelerated into the neutral zone to launch the rush. He accelerated to create space for himself and his line mates to just force the defense to back off. And that's
he's not fast, but he can do that. Yeah,
and
you're right.
That's everything, right? Like that's I go back to the X's and O's things with Rick Tocchet, but like that was the kind of thing he talked about with the way they've been moving the puck up the ice, and there hasn't been enough of that. It's not just the acceleration, it's not just the top end speed, it's the variation, it's the acceleration, it's forcing the defense to react to what you're doing, to make them make choices as opposed to them making you make choices, forcing you to make choices. And so that's what we need to see. That's what you need to keep looking for Pettersson. Is he doing things like that to create space for him before he runs out of space? He's pushing the defense back, finding space, beating the guy on the side because he's already created the angle for himself.
Wednesday, Canada versus Sweden. We'll see what that looks like. A reminder here, Sekeres and Price, no show tomorrow and on Wednesday. We're going to be back for Thursday, Friday. Thursday, we are going to recap everything that we saw, Canada versus Pettersson in Sweden, and that will have some heft to it. And then the next day, we'll turn the page to get you set for Canada versus the United States, where JT Miller is on a pretty annoying-looking third line as it stands right now for the United States. So it's a fun week, but we'll allow you to take a bit of a breath here. Again, no shows until Thursday. Matt Sekeres will be back in tow for that one. Here's the menu for today's show, brought to you by Gretabar YVR. And speaking of, you can come watch the Four Nations. You get your garb on, your color, with your Vancouver crew, presented by Fountain Tire. Don't miss Canada versus United States, February the 15th at Gretabar 50 West Cordova, hosted by Sekeres and Price, RinkWide, and Canucks Army. We've got a raffle with exclusive prizes to be won. It's your chance to party it up and cheer for a once-in-a-lifetime kind of Team Canada group. Again, we haven't seen this kind of thing together. It's all in support of the Social Run Club YVR. Tickets are $10, or you snag the VIP package that includes burger, beverage, and a game card. That's $40. Snag seating up for up to 6 people with those VIP packages. Well, doors open at 4. The puck drop is at 5, remember. This is all for the Canada-US game. It must be 19 plus. Grab your tickets now at nationgear.ca. TSN's Darren Dreger will join us next. He's going to chat about the changes that have already been made for the Vancouver Canucks and whether more might be coming before the break. We'll ask him about possible centers. Like if he agrees that the Canucks seemingly are safe on defense, does he have some names rattling around?
Yeah.
At a bunch of different price points.
Yeah.
We'll see what he says about that. Then it's our own Jeff Patterson. We could barely get him off his laptop.
Oh.
He's in Mexico. Couldn't stop talking hockey. Honestly, he would have stuck with us for another half an hour, I think. Go to the beach, J-Pat.
I'm sure his wife is thrilled.
Yeah, exactly. No, she gets it.
These guys, she's been at it a long time. Bless her. Bless her.
They're
soul.
both media lifers, but with the Canucks resurgent, we'll get into his take on the vibe change as well. Time now for our best bets of the day, brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Sekeres and Price. Do you want me to go first? Or do you want to blurb?
You know what? Let me come in off top. You've already brought it up. We talked Six Nation rugby, and I was poking. It's one of those ones you poke around. I try to bring something different here.
Yeah,
I always try to bring you guys something different whenever you ask me to do one of these. But I sat back and I went, I wonder what they're asking at Bet365 to win the men's Six Nations rugby title. And they've had 2 rounds. Ireland's sitting up the top 2-0, but England had an amazing performance against France, beat them by 1 point. Right now, England is paying $6.50 to win. So let's go for that. I figure that's a fun one. Let's throw a dart at that and see what happens.
From 6 nations to 4, I'll go back to the hockey tournament. Canada need to give up some goals to get some good numbers here. Canada minus 1.5 goals. I think they are going to be shot out of a cannon. I think the joy of playing as a group, I think they're going to score some goals.
Yeah.
I think Canada wins handily. So, but just minus 1.5 is all I need for a plus 100 for Canada to win. I think that's for you wanting to cheer on Team Canada, but actually get something for your investment. I think that's a good way. The over's kind of tempting too, less lucrative, but the over's set at 5.5. Over under set at 5.5. Go over at -125 if you want to extract a little bit of a tax there. So open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Use the code NATION. And whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Lots coming up. Darren Dreger is next. Carson Price from the Wall Center, the segment of presentation of your Pacific Toyota dealers. And they want to remind you about the Toyota BZ4X. If you haven't taken one for a test drive, if you're in the market, if you're curious about electric at all, and even if you're not, you should be. Because this vehicle, at its price right now, with its incentives and a financing rate of 0.19% right now. Go take one for a test drive. It sort of speaks for itself. You get behind the wheel of this thing, a fabulous cockpit, big screen, and the pop when your foot hits the gas pedal. Do we have to change the name of that, BJ? Do we still call it a gas pedal? I'm sure people in the e-vehicle business know better than this. When you put your foot on the pedal, we'll just say.
Power pedal.
The power pedal? That's
turbo. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't think that's official, but we'll go with it. Go take one for a test drive, folks. As I said, it does speak for itself. The BZ4X, you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives. That great APR financing, 3.29% for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today to check out the BZ4X. Darren Dreger from TSN joins us on the eve of the Four Nations face-off. We'll get into some of that in just a little bit. Team USA getting the hit with no Quinn Hughes. Before we do that, Darren, after all of this content that the Vancouver Canucks have generated, are you sort of sad that we've taken a pause in the NHL season?
No, I think we could all use a bit of a break. Obviously the Vancouver Canucks and those who are deeply involved. And, look, some of the stories haven't been written yet, clearly, right, as to how this roster is further going to get changed between now and the 7th of March. But as you guys can attest to, there's certainly a different feel to the Vancouver Canucks now. And, what we don't know is how significant that change is going to look. Again, when you roll closer to March 7th, I mean, what I expect is coming out of this Four Nations, Jim Rutherford, Patrick Galvin, it's age old, Jimmy Rutherford jumps in early and they've done that again. But more and more I'm hearing from other managers around the league that when the Four Nations is over, it will be a frenzy again. And if it's even half as interesting as it was over the last few weeks, then we're in for something. We're in for something leading up to the trade deadline, and that's going to make my good friend and colleague James Duthie unhappy because he's going to be doing a lot of juggling on the 7th of March if that is applied.
He's already been spewing hate for trades that have happened. BJ, what do you want to win?
Yeah, well, in the past, I mean, Jimmy Rutherford's trend has been always to add defensemen, and here we are talking about Carson Soucy maybe on the way out. I mean, do you really think that's something they really go towards, or is that just them spitballing, thinking about where they might want to go?
Well, it does feel, Patrick, a little bit like spitballing because, when you look at the Vancouver Canucks blue line now, it's pretty good. Yeah. It's pretty good, and it has the potential of getting better in the not too distant future based on, now they've got a real nice class of developing young defense. And I we talked about this last week. I'm a fan of Victor Mancini. I think he's going to be a real good NHL player. I do. You have to be patient with defensemen. That's just the way it is, like goaltenders. But if the right piece pops into the market, then of course they're going to look at it. I mean, that's what every general manager will tell you. But the heavy lifting for Vancouver, for the most part, I think is done. But then you look up the middle of the ice and they're probably going to need a centerman. And if Elias Pettersson doesn't find his game, then that just elevates that need, not the want, the need to do something more significant at center ice. But I can tell you, fellas, I'm on this story, not just specific to Vancouver, across the league, and how difficult it's going to be to acquire that good young centerman, right? You're going to have to want to pay the price or be willing to pay that price. And are we sure that Dylan Cousins is actually in play? He might have been back when the negotiations, discussions around the idea of Pettersson and Bo Byram would have been included, and Dylan Cousins and all of that bigger picture, sure. And I think that Kevin Adams has done a real good job just recognizing where Buffalo is at. And that's why he hasn't slammed the door on any of the speculating specific to Dylan Cousins. But there's so many teams that would be interested and be willing to pay the price for Dylan Cousins. I'm not convinced that deal is going to happen. There may not be enough time. And if you're Adams, are you sure if you're willing to move that piece that the deal that you're going to get for Dylan Cousins isn't better in the offseason? Because now you're attracting a bigger audience. So if we can just put Dylan Cousins as an outlier right now, then who are we looking at center? Braden Shen, sure. Braden Shen is willing to waive his no trade clause, then yeah, I mean, I know that, and I reported this last week, that St. Louis is wisely gauging the market. And then you've got the Scott Laughton rumors out of Philadelphia. Vancouver willing to pay a real steep price for Scott Laughton. And then for me, that market starts to ratchet down a little bit. I have mentioned Ryan O'Reilly because, again, I put him as a bit of an outlier. I really do. I just think center is going to be tough because the buyers probably outweigh the sellers, the guys who have significant pieces that you can see would make a team like Vancouver better.
Laughton's a fascinating study in terms of what that price would be for him as a 30-year-old, never a gaudy point getter in any way, shape, or form, but he's got a fabulous contract with an additional year here at $3 million. So it's like a super rental, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, what do they extract out of a team? Like, what are we talking here?
Well, they've wanted a first-round draft pick all along. And I guess Danny Briere thinks that he's still going to get that. And until the trade deadline comes and goes, I mean, you have to hold to your price. But the Calgary trade that the Flyers made was also very interesting because they moved out two young pieces in Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. And, they get Pelche back and they get Kuzmenko back. But really, this was the Philadelphia Flyers trying to create more cap space. And I don't think that they're necessarily going to be a big player on the trade front. That could change as we, get closer to the deadline and into the offseason. But maybe it takes some of the burn off that the Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. But the Flyers actually feel like their fan base is getting a little antsy. Like they need this hockey club to be relevant again. And they're a good competitive team, but we're talking about locking down a playoff team and getting to that place where you can contend again. So they want to be a big game hunter. They do. And it feels more like they're going to try and utilize some of that cap space in the offseason. So, let's see what the market is on Laughton. No short of interest. The Maple Leafs for sure interested. All those teams that are looking for a center can appreciate what he can bring. But you're right. I mean, the offensive numbers aren't there. Defensively, he's a respected piece, and he's a high-character player. So there's a lot of reasons why Vancouver should be interested in Scott Laughton.
You talk about cap space, Darren. Canucks have a ton of it. What could they possibly do as a leverage point, as an advantage point on a team in a trade?
Yeah, and I mean, it's currency. It literally is. Especially for other teams around the league that don't have the same luxury right now of having that level of cap space. So, and I look again, because of when you look at the standings and you see how tight things are primarily in the East, you are looking at teams that don't have that cap space, right? So how much of that is going to matter? And there are teams that are going to have to make a decision in the not too distant future coming out of the Four Nations face-off where we're not there. We're just not there. And so what can we do to better our position? Maybe bring a player back, all of that stuff. So I do think that the cap space that the Canucks have puts them in a different market. Okay, if we're going head-to-head Canadian teams here, Toronto doesn't have that. I mean, that's exactly what the Toronto Maple Leafs need, and they don't have it. And they have a need at center ice. They do. They love the idea of Braden Shen. And it's less about the younger pieces. If Toronto can find a team like St. Louis that is keen on a hockey trade, then Toronto can make that deal because they've got prospects like Danforth, a young defenseman coming. You know, you've got Easton Cowan playing in the Ontario League. You've got Fraser Minton, who's a pro between the NHL and the Toronto Marlies. But is that enough? You know, is that enough? Or is there going to be have to be more to make the cap numbers work from the Maple Leafs perspective? And again, that's a game that the Vancouver Canucks don't have to play at center. So that could be their advantage.
Lawton's kind of in between because he's got that additional year. But do the Canucks want to address the long-term center ice thing here, or are they just looking to get a little bit better before the playoffs begin? How much of a rush are they to find a true 2C? Are they going to try to hope that Philip Hedl becomes that?
Well, I mean, based on the way that Philip Hedl has played, and knock on wood here, this guy can stay healthy. You know, for me, it's less about what he does on the ice. That's pretty obvious. When he's healthy, he's a contributing player. It can be an impactful piece. And you're seeing that there is a trade bump here that we're realizing with Philip Hedl and how he's contributed. But look, the reason why the New York Rangers were okay with including him in that deal is because they have long-term concerns with his health, right? So I don't think that Vancouver shares that yet. So at center, it's going to be best available player. It would be nice, I think, for the Vancouver Canucks if they got a little bit of term, because then it's one less thing to have to worry about as you go into the later part of the season and into the off season. But I'm fascinated again by who is available, who isn't available, what might be available at center. Because again, I think that there was a buzz created when Braden Shen's name entered the process last week, and with that full no trade, he obviously, he's gonna be the guy that determines whether or not he gets moved or not. But I think of Nick Bjugstad with Utah. Utah's a team that's in it. Who doesn't want to add a 6'5" centerman, who's got some versatility to his game? I look at Luke Kunin, who's with the San Jose Sharks. He's going to get traded. He's not a bad player, but where does he fit? Is he a 3C on a good team, a 3C, or is he lower? Is he a center? Is he a winger? I mean, he's been playing mostly to the wing, but you could say the same thing about Scotty Lawton, right? Because they're trying to develop Noah Cates and how he's played for the Philadelphia Flyers. So I'm kind of going in circles here with the centers because we keep chewing on the same type of guys, but who is best available? You're not going to know until you get into the nitty gritty of what that negotiation is and trade protection and who's willing to go west.
Certainly here we've had a sense that Brock Besser and the Canucks are not close on a new deal. Have you heard anything different? And what is the buzz? What would be the buzz out there from other teams looking at him as a potential trade target?
Yeah, I mean, there would be a buzz. Again, you guys know this guy well. Seems to be a real popular player in that market, right? Yeah. And when you look now at the cap projections, who blames Ben Hankinson for playing hardball? And I know that there have been some numbers that have been thrown out there, specific to what his market value might be. You're not going to know that until you actually get into the market. And that's the job of Hankinson and every player agent. But now what's been pushed to the side is the calendar. Because even though year 2 and year 3 of the cap projection that was released recently by the League and the Players Association somewhat is written in pencil and could be adjusted, you're not talking about a significant change, I don't think. I don't believe that will be the case. Brock Boeser on the open market is going to command a high dollar, more money, I think, than the Vancouver Canucks are going to want to spend. And so they're going to have a decision, I think, that needs to be made on March 7th. But I do think, and I've said this on the Darren Dreger podcast before too, Boeser is, I believe, a disciple of the teachings of Rick Tocchet as head coach of the Vancouver Canucks. And if Rick Tocchet isn't the coach of the Vancouver Canucks, or Boeser doesn't 100% know that Rick Tocchet, well, that's going to factor into whatever decision he's going to be making. It's not just about opportunity, financial or otherwise. You want to go to a place where you're comfortable with the direction the team is going and what your role is going to be in that direction. So last time I checked with management in Vancouver on Boeser, it was, hey, we just need to let the dust settle here for a little bit. You know, no different than the Elias Pettersson rumors and whether or not they're going to, be kicked to the curb or no, just let things settle, get through the Four Nations face-off. And, I'm sure that there'll be conversations with Hankinson about Boeser during this break. You can still do business and managers will continue to do their business during this time. But I don't see any resolution on that front anytime soon.
Before we move on to Four Nations, any insight on Demko's injury here? Do we take Rick Tocchet at face value that it's not the knee?
No, I do.
Yeah.
And I don't think that he would be that. I mean, he's an honest man. And when he can show transparency, I think for the most part he does.
He doesn't lead astray. You're right.
No, that's my point. And what value would there be in him being that straightforward if that weren't the case, or if he's trying to push us away from that story? I mean, the best I got was he tweaked something. All right, thanks, Tips. Pretty obvious he pulled or tweaked something. I mean, we can all see that. But unfortunate, pretty obvious as well when you look at how well he was playing of late. It had been a long time coming. So everybody's hoping that this bit of a break, I guess is what we'll call it, will help him mend and he'll be back to form again.
Four Nations has been pretty good in terms of buy-in from all the players. We looked at that Canadian power play unit on the ice today.
Which unit?
Are you kidding me? But does Quinn Hughes play in the tournament if it's the Olympics, do you think? Is that the difference that we're seeing here, for guys like that where – maybe if this is something more substantial, the guys are willing to take the bullets here, but for a guy like Quinn Hughes, it's just not worth it?
Yeah, I don't know that, to be fair. This is a challenge because it is the introduction to the international calendar. That's what it is. But it's not best on best. It's best on available best, right? Yes. I mean, not having Leon Draisaitl and David Pastrnak. Nobody, they didn't write the rules to this. And then, of course, not having the availability of the Russian players. I mean, that's when you think historically best on best, that's what we're talking about here. And so we don't have that. I feel, this is my own view, and I don't have this from Quinn or anyone associated with Quinn Hughes of the Vancouver Canucks. The Olympics are better and different. And I think that the decision, as difficult as this was, and it was a real tough one because I've been to the championships where Quinn Hughes was there representing Team USA and loved every second of it. I mean, no one wraps themselves in the flag more than the Hughes family. And I've seen it at all levels with Jack and Quinn especially. But you want to get Ellen and Jimmy riled up, you just get talking international hockey and who's better and why, right? So this was a real difficult decision, but it would have been that much more difficult if we're talking about the Olympics. I think that's fair.
Hughes's, Kachucks, someday it'll be on the Olympic stage, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that time is coming. And from a Canadian perspective, I feel for Mark Scheifele as an example. This guy was put on alert Friday night after that game. He was told, look, if Sid can't go, man, you're going. You're the guy. I'm sure he had travel plans, and I'm sure that he'll, take advantage of the break that it seems likely now he's going to have, that Crosby's come out and said, I'm good to go. I'm playing in the tournament. I don't think they're going to, I haven't scoured X or social media. I don't think anybody's mentioned anything around Mark Scheifele.
Nope.
I know he was put on alert on Friday night after their game, but similar to Hughes, Scheifele would be fine with that. I think he should have been on the roster, to be fair. I think that he earned it. But now he's got to be thinking about the World Cup. He has to be thinking about the Olympics and just, doing everything that he can to make those Canadian teams moving forward. So now that Sid has confirmed he's in, my excitement as a fan of hockey goes up considerably, because it would have been brutal to not have him participate. Because you're right. You look at that number one power play, and you've got Makar, McDavid, Reinhart, Crosby, and McKinnon. That's power play one, 4 forwards and Cale Makar. And then who do you have on the other side? Theodore and Morrissey, Braden Point, Mitch Marner, and Mark Stone. That's second power play. Like, come on, man.
Don't take a penalty.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, right. And then, Crosby is net front. Like, hey, where are we going to slot you in? Like, why you go there? Like,
amazing. And I quickly had a look. I quickly had a look at the lineup for Team USA, and it looks like they're going with Kyle Connor, Jack Eichel, and Matthew Tkachuk. 1, 2, 3. Who's the first line? Does it really matter? You just have to put 4, 3-man lines out there, and we can call line 1, 3, 2, 4. It doesn't matter. So that's what gets me excited with the Four Nations looming here.
Well, we'll see if we fully get reeled in by the tournament as it goes on. As for you, sir, thanks for doing this, and we'll touch base coming up here very soon.
All right. Thanks, Blake, and good seeing you, Patrick.
Take care, Darren.
Sekeres and Price from the Wall Center, and this next segment brought to you by the fine folks at Ben Moss. If you haven't checked the calendar lately, it's that month, and the people at Ben Moss can help you get through these tough times, folks. Ben Moss, proudly Canadian-owned and operated with a history dating back more than 100 years. 5 locations in BC, including Abbotsford, Victoria, Chilliwack, Willowbrook in Langley, and Coquitlam Center. They're committed to customer satisfaction. Check out a large selection of Canadian mine diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. Mine diamonds available with payment plans to suit your needs. So for more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, because love is timeless, and their help in this tough month of February is also timeless as well. We will welcome back to the show Jeff Patterson. He is taking time from his vacation to give us one last little synopsis of the final weekend before this 2-week break. By the way, are we just unanimous here? Does the hockey media just love the 2-week break? Because most of the hockey media gets the time off.
Yes.
As he speaks to us from Mexico.
100% yes.
The overwhelming feedback on Twitter, because again, only the Torontonian markets are really covering the Four Nations. So everybody's like, bye, see you in 2 weeks. And everybody seemed to really enjoy this little. But the Canucks also will benefit from this. The Quinn Hughes news, obviously, Jeff taking center stage over the course of the weekend. And if you are a Canucks fan, my goodness, is this only good news in your books? What do you think?
Well, before I get to Quinn Hughes, let me just say, and I don't want to out him, so I'm not going to name names, but there was a Canadian NHL general manager on my flight here to Cabo. So if teams are making deals during this break and there's one team that seems absent in all the activity, you can probably do some math here. But look, GMs are allowed to get breaks too. And in this technological world we live in, I'm coming to you from Cabo, and work can be done, but I'm just saying there was an NHL GM. He was way up at the front of the plane. Not a surprise. Yes. So a getaway for everybody, except Quinn Hughes, although I don't know what his plans are on the break. But no, look, I think a mature decision on his part. I think Canuck fans should applaud it. I think, though, also it speaks to the seriousness of the injury, that if there was a way that he could have gone and skip the first game, but try to be ready for the Canada game next Saturday, I thought that was plausible. But this tells you that he knows his body best, and in consultation with Canucks medical staff, the best course of action here was to sit this thing out. So with the 2-week break, the hope is that he can heal up. He's been skating. Rick Tocchet said on Saturday that he had gone for another good skate in the morning. We saw him midweek. And the fact that he's on the ice tells you that he's able to get around, that this isn't something that keeps him away from the rink entirely. But fingers crossed for him. Hockey's just way better with Quinn Hughes in it. It's more fun, usually more exciting. And yeah, I mean, if anybody can use a 2-week break, not only for his hand, but obviously for this oblique injury as well, get him rested up and ready, because they hit the ground running out of the break with 2 sets of back-to-backs. They're in Vegas and Utah, and then a couple of days, and then the 2 Southern California teams. So 4 games in 6 nights, but a pair of back-to-backs. I mean, that'll test anybody, but especially somebody that's coming off an injury. So let's see if he's ready to go coming out of the chute on the other side of this break.
Ready to go? What about Thatcher Demko? Or what's your level of concern there? Obviously, we saw him leave the game. Rick Tocchet telling me after the game, no, it didn't happen in warm-up, despite what Sportsnet had possibly figured out. It happened in the game, and, basically Kevin Lankinen saying, yeah, he didn't have any idea he was going to have to come in.
Yeah, concern, obviously, just given the backstory of Thatcher Demko and all that he's been through to get to this point. And anytime that he has to leave a game, we saw it in Seattle. It was back spasms, and that kept him out for, a week or 10 days, but ultimately not that serious. I want to take Rick Tocchet at face value, but Rick Tocchet has also told us a lot of guys are day-to-day or questionable, and then it turns out to be a lot more than that. And so that's not a shot at the head coach. It's just that's the way he handles all of these situations. I do believe him that in the immediate aftermath, he probably didn't have great detail, but look, Thatcher Demko was dialed in coming off the shutout performance against Colorado and was good again in San Jose, only faced the 6 shots. Like Quinn Hughes, these guys are elite-level athletes. They know when something isn't quite right, and I think Thatcher particularly is in tune to his body, and so probably was the best course of action. But again, for a team that's starting to hit its stride, having success, made these trades, guys have stepped in, they've fit in well, things are going the Canucks' way. And then, of course, when Thatcher Demko has to leave a hockey game, yeah, there's a big level of concern. Now, Kevin Lankinen offsets that because the guy's just been terrific, whether the starter or coming in cold. That's twice now, the game in Seattle and this one where he's had to come in cold and delivered a victory for the Vancouver Canucks. That's not easy, especially when his mind was probably, all right, I'm not playing tonight. I've got a bag to pack. I got to get to 4 Nations, all that kind of stuff. And then he's thrust in 10 minutes in against a team like Toronto that can light goaltenders up. So credit to Kevin Lankinen. He's just been so solid for the Vancouver Canucks. But I do wonder, are we going to get any sort of update on Thatcher Demko during the break here, or are we going to, will it be all eyes on that first practice when the Canucks reconvene next week?
It's one of the caveats for the poll question, which we thought was just going to be a measurement of the skeptics. We knew full well going in that it was going to be a positive outcome, but how many people are still holding out? And the injuries would be a big reason for the holdout here. The poll question, just after the recent run of form and with all the trades, are you convinced the Canucks make the playoffs right now? And, anybody on the other side might be saying, until Quinn Hughes is back, until you see Thatcher Demko back for a month straight, they might be holding out because of the wording there. Are you convinced? Where are you on this, Jeff?
I'm not sure I can get convinced, just because another Quinn Hughes injury certainly could derail their best hopes here. But I feel a lot better. The fact that they are back above the playoff bar. Hey, it wasn't that long ago that they were down by 5 points to the Calgary Flames and then needed a win. I think it was on the same day that Calgary had an earlier win, got to 5, and then the Canucks were able to get back within 3, but they were still trailing by 3. And now look at them go, 6-1-1 in their last 8 hockey games. I wrote about this at Canucks Army before I departed, and it was my Sunday column. But anytime you make a trade, you hope guys are going to come in and fit in and contribute right away. I'm not sure that things could have gone any better for all 3 of the newcomers. Think about it. They get traded to Vancouver, of all places, which has been the front of the hockey shitstorm for all season. They had to be asking, what are we getting ourselves into? Why am I going to Vancouver? And so they land, they lose in overtime to Detroit that first one, but Philip Hedl scored that night. Drew O'Connor did some good things. Marcus Pettersson settled in. The next game, they shut out Colorado. Pettersson elects to re-sign here after having toured the city. I'm not even sure he's seen the mountains yet with the weather that we've had this week. And Drew O'Connor scores the penalty shot winner in San Jose. they win 3 in a row. They win back-to-back on home ice. And for these guys, I think they all want to win, but they want to feel like they belong. And so to be able to contribute, to start to shift the culture and just the feeling in that locker room, it was an incredible week for the Vancouver Canucks. If those guys had all come and the team had middling success and they kind of wondered about their place here, they leave for 2 weeks. What are they coming back to? But I would think they're hungry now to get back here and, just decompress over the break, process the trade, and then hit the ground running. And of course, they haven't spent a shift with Quinn Hughes yet. None of them. So there's that to look forward to as well. So just really an incredible week. And to bring it back to the poll question, that, I feel a whole lot better right now about their chances of, I'm not under grand illusions that they're going to rocket up the standings and chase Edmonton and Vegas, but look at the standings. People have been so focused on the playoff bar. They're right there with Los Angeles. Now, LA's got games in hand. They have a ton of home games left, and the Canucks are in LA for that third game out of the break. So all of a sudden, that becomes a massive hockey game for the Vancouver Canucks. But I'm not sure I'm convinced, but feeling pretty good about the way this team has solidified to put themselves in a position to run this out and be a playoff team.
You talk about 3 new guys, obviously the trade players who came in on trade, but are you ready to include Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, as a 4th new guy that's going to change the meter here?
Well, I'm really curious. I mean, he's been terrific and he's been a ton of fun to watch, and he has been part of this culture shift. All he's done is contributed to a run of games. His NHL debut against the Washington Capitals, who were the best team in the NHL and the highest scoring team. Talk about a baptism by fire, but he survived that. He was part of a shutout win over Colorado, the Leafs on a Saturday night. This hasn't just been a run of games for him. He's been thrown in some real tests and it's looked good. But when Quinn Hughes comes back, you've added Marcus Pettersson. I think really quietly, Derek Forbort, for what he is, has been solid for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yep.
So dull but effective.
So is there room on the left side, I guess, is the question. And if there is, who's coming out? Well, he's not playing ahead of Hughes. He's not playing ahead of Pettersson. Right. Could he, shuttle and substitute with Forbort on some nights? Maybe. I think we've seen with this Canucks team, though, that, they've brought guys in from Abbotsford, given them a run, and then sent them back to the minors to sort of hone their craft. I wouldn't be shocked. But at the same time, if you think that he is, part of what you're building here, he's so far ahead of schedule as a 20-year-old third-round pick playing meaningful minutes in the National Hockey League. You're not going to slide him over to the right side. So I don't know. It's a good problem to have, I suppose, just in terms of, all season long, we've been asking about depth and when are they going to bring in bodies? Well, hey, maybe one of the answers was there in Abbotsford all along, and this is just his time. But at the same time, I kind of feel like he might be the odd guy out ultimately when Quinn Hughes is back and 100% healthy.
The Soucy trade, does it happen during Four Nations, or is this going to be something they need to work on? And if you haven't already commented on the value you think he brings, not on the ice, what do they get from him? Are they selling low here, or can they use him as a bit?
I do wonder. I joked off the top about general managers making deals over the break here. Is there an unwritten sort of rule, certainly in the first week? There isn't an all-star game or an all-star break this year. Are you actually going to move guys? Or are they going to let these players have a week to themselves? And I think Pat wrote that Carson Soucy in Arizona with his young family, that would be tough, obviously, if you're scrambling to pick up your life and move on. So I do wonder if we see much trade activity in this first week of the break. But by the second week, teams are reconvening. Canucks will be practicing as this tournament goes along. I think their first practice is next Tuesday or Wednesday. So even though Rick Tocchet's going to be there with Canada, there will be hockey at the NHL level for all these teams as they get set to relaunch out of the break. So we shall see. Look, I think part of the success here is that, okay, we talked about the logjam on the left side, and Carson Soucy acknowledged that when I talked to him last week, but he slid over to the right pretty seamlessly. He's paired with Elias Pettersson, and the results are what the results are. So, I know that there are a lot of people that don't want to see Noah Juleson in this Vancouver Canucks lineup unless it's an emergency case. I'm not here to knock Noah, but I think you have seen that the organization feels that they've got 6 or 7 because they've been doing this without Quinn Hughes of late. Guys ahead of Juleson on the depth chart, and one of them would be Soucy over on the right side. So are you better served to try and rehabilitate him and use him over on the right, or sell low? And something tells me that they may try to push forward here with Carson Soucy as a right side guy. And all of a sudden, for all the talk all year about, oh my goodness, that right side, and why isn't management doing anything? Well, you got Filip Hronek, who has elevated his play. Tyler Myers has been sensational here for the last week or 2 weeks, and really for most of this season. And now Carson Soucy is a veteran. Again, he's not everybody's cup of tea, but as a third pair guy, I think there's room for him there. So, it comes back to me more about Elias Pettersson and what you do there, because ultimately Quinn Hughes is going to play and play a lot when he gets the green light to go. So, again, they've got some good decisions to have. And dare I say, they actually have a surplus on defense right now after making the Marcus Pettersson trade. That's something that I didn't think I would ever get my head around for most of this season, but that's sort of the position they find themselves in right now.
Guys, are they a defense first team now? Is that what the Vancouver Canucks are?
Without a doubt.
Patrick, what did Rick say? They're a win ugly team. Yeah, right? That was in the coach's own words. He was like,
but I was convinced. I was convinced it was just out of necessity in the short to maybe medium term. But is this just going to be by design? Are they going to be by design over the next 3 years, over like a long period? Are they going to be a 2-1 or a 2.5 to 1.5 kind of team?
I think the results speak for themselves here. Yeah. They beat Boston 2-0 back in November. That was the only game all year that they had won with fewer than 3 goals, up until the start of this stretch where they beat Washington 2-1, they beat San Jose 2-1 in overtime, and they beat the Leafs 2-1. So all of a sudden, and they beat Nashville 3-1 with an empty netter last week. So really, in this 6-1-1 stretch, 4 of the victories essentially have been 2-1. So I think that answers your question right then and there. Now, maybe Elias Pettersson is going to find his game over this break and come back and hit the ground running out of more shifts like he did in the first period the other night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. That would be the hope. But ultimately, you step back and we marvel at what Quinn Hughes has done. But they've got this glut of forwards that have 35, 34, 33 points. Their leading forward scorer at the break is now Brock Besser with 35 points on the season. So if you start to look at, okay, are they going to be a playoff team? And if they're a wild card team, they're going to run headlong into one of the top teams in the conference. Can you lock it down and win 4 games out of 7? Do you stand a chance in the playoffs? Yes, you try to make it a slog and slow these teams down, but it's going to be really difficult to win playoff series when you're scoring 1 and 2 goals a night. So dangerous way to live. They're getting away with it right now, but I do think that they probably have to find a way to generate a little bit more.
Peach, what's the template?
I was going to say 2-0 or 3-1 really feels like the ideal Rick Tocchet score.
Do you think they want this long term though, Peach, from what you've been able to glean?
What we hear from Tocchet so often is there's one thing he clearly wants more of, which is driving to the slot, as Filip Chytil did on his first goal for the Vancouver Canucks. I think more than anything, there is an element of that. We've seen glimpses of it. Certainly I thought the first and third periods on Saturday against the Leafs stood out from the second period. The second period, Jeff heard me squawking more than once about the lack of an east-west pass that was there. They were looking those off. They were doing that less in the opening and final frame. And I think if we see more of that, because I think it's also just a confidence thing, they've struggled so much to kind of have a complete game. And certainly Jeff's already said it. It really all comes back to how Elias Pettersson plays. And certainly I thought I saw a lot there on Saturday night that suggests he's on his way back. And certainly post-game, as I wrote about yesterday, the vibes were very, very good. And, it feels like a team that's growing in confidence and feels better about itself. So we'll see how it looks when they come back. But certainly I think the plan here is to carry on, as Jeff said, with the defensive game, but adding a little more on top of that.
I would just add briefly that, and it may sound funny, but honestly, the best thing that maybe happened to the Canucks on Saturday was that the Leafs scored with 5 seconds to go in the second period, because in San Jose, they tried to milk a 1-0 lead across the finish line, got outshot 16-3, and the Sharks scored late, and then the Canucks won, so they get away with it. But I'm with Pat. I thought third period the other night, like outside of the Toronto power play late, and yes, in a 1-goal game, they generated and had some looks, but they held Toronto to 7 shots over the final 20 minutes and actually went to the attack, drew a penalty, scored on their own power play. I think there probably were some lessons learned that you can get away with it against San Jose, but you can't just sit back and think that you're going to get these 1-0 wins across the finish line. So it wasn't pretty. A lot of them haven't been pretty, but they've been damn effective ultimately, and that is the reason that they're 6-1-1 in the last 8 and above the playoff bar here at the break. Yeah,
there's not going to be a lot of plays of the week on the Vancouver Canucks reel, but they're getting wins, and I think fans will take that at the for the time being, at the very least. Jeff, allow us to get out of your way. Go put your toes in the sand, enjoy some time off, and we'll catch up at the week from now.
All right, sounds good, guy. Thanks.
Take care, bud.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca. Sekeres and Price featuring Patrick Johnston from the Wall Center, of course. Extend your game night with a staycation in downtown Vancouver. Why wouldn't you? Especially with the good vibes back. Book a Sekeres and Price exclusive rate at the Wall Center. Call the hotel at 604-331-1000. Tell them we sent you. Sekeres and Price, that is. Some blackout dates may apply based on availability. Check it all out here at the Wall Center. Our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question from Friday, which was the best part of the Canucks week. They were back in a playoff spot. The newcomers, Demko's performance, or the end of the drama. Demko's performance getting big regard here. I mean, pushing 50% of the poll. That one surprised you, PJ?
Well, I mean, as someone who's been dealing with it all, I mean, I can understand the Demko performance, and I suppose that's fans trying to rise above. But to me, honestly, the end of the drama. Like, I cannot overstate, as I wrote about on the weekend, and I mentioned earlier to Jeff Patterson, I cannot overstate the vibe in the room on Saturday night and just how good those guys feel. And listen, it's one game and we'll see where this goes, but just the sort of feeling of relief you sense in there, no matter, just that they've managed, they've moved on. This is the new team they are going to be. And, we mentioned earlier, 3 new faces, 4, if you want to include Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, just a reset of things. And of course, I think, I haven't had a chance to talk to these guys because of course they were basically away all week, or for much of the week, I should say. But like, you kind of wonder themselves, like they sit back and they look at the cap space, and we talked about Darren Dreger with this, right? You wonder themselves, they're going, what is management going to give us? I think there is a cautious, hopeful optimism here. And obviously they've pulled ahead of the Flames and look like they've got their sets maybe on the LA Kings. So I just think that to me, as the person who's dealing with it almost every day, that to me is the biggest outcome. But I definitely understand fans saying, listen, let's just talk about performance. And the Thatcher Demko's week was outstanding. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
778-402-9680 into the Great Clips inbox. It's going to be great. Thankfully, this is where we would normally slot Super Bowl talk, Patrick. I don't think we need to. I really don't think there's anything that needs to be said other than, like, if you had said the Eagles won the Super Bowl to me before the game, okay. Yeah. In that manner, no. The only worthwhile debate I can see coming out of that game, which was a more deflating TV show, that game or the Seahawks beating Peyton Manning?
I didn't even thought of those terms. I don't even know. This one was. Certainly my interest level was lower. I'm not a Seahawks fan. I think people know that, but I appreciate it when I appreciate my friends and
being happy. Yeah,
that being happy, and so the local sort of connection, if you will, with that.
But the TV show is over there early too, right? In fact, I think
that's what I mean. Like, at least there was something to kind of carry on, whereas this one you're sort of the outside observer, and I was in it. I mean, as I said with Matt last week, like, It's not that I don't admire what Andy Reid and the Chiefs have done. I was just tired of the Chiefs and I wanted to see something new. But then obviously nobody likes a blowout, and that was a blowout. So I don't know.
The better debates were away from the football game. Halftime show debate and over. Hey, I've always played down the Super Bowl ad thing here in Canada. Oh, we're so hard done, but we've had enough of a trickle upwards of the American brands that carry over on both sides of the border that I'd never felt shortchanged. This year I kind of did. That seemed like that was the least entertaining ad group that we got north of the border, like, of all time.
I wasn't paying that close attention to what was being shown because I rarely do, and I know better. I guess did we get any toilet paper ads? Because generally we've managed to forever have the same old rhythm of all the ridiculously boring midday sports advertising with toilet paper and what have you. So did we get that? I don't know. That's kind of my standard. If there were no toilet paper ads, then I think it's been a good year.
It seemed like local mom and pop shops had Super Bowl ads over like the big corporations. Tim Hortons did okay with the football song. That was pretty decent as well. And in terms of the halftime show too, I mean, no real thoughts on it. It was fine. It was not great. It was not bad. I don't know. I got nothing there. Yeah. The only other thing I'll point out, and I saw a couple other posts on this, and this is just the broadcaster in me. Maybe other people took note. But I didn't give Mike this tweet, but somebody tweeted, "I just can't fathom having all year to prepare this Super Bowl broadcast, and that's the scoreboard you come up with."
Right.
Just as that was the simplest score bug I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, that was straight out of 1979. It was a little odd in this day and age where you've got a lot of things that you can do technologically, and they went like old school Chiron there.
I don't know. I there are times, honestly, when I'm watching football and I'm thinking, do I really need all this? Like, I can see where they are in the field, and I'm hopefully paying attention, so I know it down. Like, what do you need? The score and the time,
that's all they gave you. This was right up your alley then.
I thought it was marvelous.
I came across this as well. The top 2 rated content posts on social media regarding the Super Bowl were both Lionel Messi related. A photo of him somewhere, and then there's Super Bowl ad, which we'll roll out here. I mean, they're about to start their season, and that's what they're advertising here, is that when the football ends, the football begins.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty spectacular ad with him booting it through the uprights, and a lot of people have been critical of the MLS Apple deal, and maybe this puts a few more eyes on the season. I don't know. You have to be a believer in old school advertising, but it's pretty funny that as ironclad and as bulletproof as the NFL is, it was the soccer player that stole the show in terms of content all weekend long.
On Thursday, I was walking back to the SkyTrain to head home from the wonderful studios, Carson Price Studios, wonderful Wall Center. And there's David Beckham underwear ads. Like, this guy, like the sort of global brand, the global reach of guys like Beckham and Messi, it just remains like undefeated. And it's a reminder of what the NFL obviously is the biggest thing in the world, and the Super Bowl is in many ways the biggest thing in the world, but it is still not soccer.
It's still dwarfed. Yeah.
It's still dwarfed. And the power and the reach of Messi and Beckham and, going back Cristiano Ronaldo, like, guys, going back now 30, 40 years, like that is there. It is a global, the way that the game has seeped into everything. It's even in North America now. That's what stands out to me. It was a great ad. Absolutely agree. And well played by MLS on that regard.
Speaking of MLS, do we have news on the Whitecaps? Depends on your opinion of the Mirror in the UK. But the story gets furthered. A very vague little blurb posted in the Mirror confirming, that Ryan Reynolds is interested in a purchase of the Vancouver Whitecaps. What was your take on reading that? Because again, very short on details. Almost you could say a waste of ink. But they put it up, so we feel obliged to at least forward this on to the masses here in Vancouver. Is this news in your world?
It felt very, I know this from rugby. It felt very kind of UK press going, oh, it's an American like sports story. Maybe they mean it for real this time. And you're kind of like, you go read it and only mention talk in the North American media. What talk in the, I mean, are you talking about a tweet you saw? I don't know. Certainly you poke around this. I know there was at least a post on Reddit suggesting, oh, Ryan's very interested. I heard back channels that, I don't think he's interested. I certainly think he cares about soccer and he cares about his hometown. But the note in that Reddit post noting it would be a complicated deal. Certainly, yes, we all know that, Blake. Did you know that the Whitecaps don't control their own stadium and have limited opportunity to grow revenue? I believe we heard that somewhere before, and it might have been something I wrote.
Yes,
it is the problem with the Whitecaps. I mean, listen, if Ryan Reynolds wanted to come in and white knight on this and buy the team, and then at some point try to figure out how to basically put his team in its own stadium, which we all know would have changed things dramatically had they been able to do that almost 20 years ago now. It's a different story, but I have deep skepticism. I read that story and I went, there's nothing in here. It's just a discussion of a guy that's a celebrity, and it's kind of it.
Again, folks, he's the quarterback for a group, right? Like he doesn't have 300, 400 million cash lying around.
No.
And he's done this elsewhere. He bought a Mexican team, Necaxa. He bought a team in Colombia, Deportivo, with like Eva Longoria and Kate Upton and a bunch of others as well. So he's done well in forming these conglomerations, but this is next level here in terms of the cost, to not get any real estate. So, complicated with a capital C here if he's able to get groups together.
I mean, he kicked tires on the Senators. He's got a long way down the track. He got to the point where basically his bankers were going toe-to-toe with Gary Bettman about what they wanted. And the NHL, in the end, really wanted Michael Andlauer to be the owner. Andlauer, of course, has been frustrated at times with the NHL. But certainly, it still blows my mind that the NHL had opportunity to bring in a global celebrity as an owner in their league, and they found a way not to. But that's
really chased him away.
If he's interested, he will be interested. He will kick tires. But as it stands right now, there does not seem to be a whole lot of fire underneath whatever smoke this story may have been.
Fine, you buzzkill, honestly. Speaking of buzzkill, CFL free agency's buzzkill as well. It officially opens tomorrow, but in the tried and true nature of professional sports these days, all the news has basically been reported already. Which you wonder for a league like the CFL, should they do a better job of keeping things under wraps a little bit? Because bursting on the scene with an organized free agency period with all these stars either remaining or moving. I mean, it might be a little bit more fun, but regardless, as I said, most of the work's been done. The Lions did pretty well here, Patrick. Yeah. I mean, the concerned names have all been kept in the fold for the most part, and getting Butler back, as much as I thought William Stanback was pretty good for them. Yeah. I think it's been a tidy bit of work here for the BC Lions. So I chatted with Farhan before the show. He wasn't expecting anything medium or large to be announced, maybe some stuff around the very edges. But again, there has to be some optimism here, I think, here for Lions fans.
Yeah. I mean, coming off a season that had its ups and downs, shall we say? Yeah. You mentioned the timing thing. It's interesting about to be honest, until we kind of started talking about this before the show, I hadn't actually put together that free agency wasn't open yet. Right. Because everything had happened. I was just like, oh, well, I guess we're in that win, which, to me, there's something to fix there because intentionally they have it after the Super Bowl, right? But you want your news. Do you really want your news? I don't really know if it makes a difference whether it was 2 weeks ago or this week and going forward. But my instinct is kind of like, well, the Super Bowl is kind of off the radar. So why not try to push it back so that people are maybe talking a little bit about CFL after the Super Bowl, make it a late March deadline? I don't know. I mean, I know there's always complication with bookings and all blah 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 blah. But
yeah, I think they want the business done earlier rather than later. Maybe you put it in the first week of the 2-week gap though of the Super Bowl, right? You can move it up a little bit if you want it as well. But it looks good for the BC Lions as well. I was gone last week because I was in Dublin, and Six Nations rugby was going on. And Patrick, I left before. I didn't get to see any of the atmosphere. I mean, Dublin's got good atmosphere at the worst of times. But it would have been fun. Scotland versus Ireland. It wasn't in town. It was in Scotland, but nevertheless.
Do you want me to tell you about Edinburgh, having watched rugby in Edinburgh?
Please, yeah.
I mean, I did it in, this is a long time ago, high school rugby tour. We got to go to Calcutta Cup, England, Scotland. It was an amazing experience. Honestly, that is big as it gets. It's not, Ireland, Scotland is a nice rivalry, but it's not England versus Scotland. But nonetheless, Edinburgh on a match day, it is one of those ones where people the streets are lit up. People are literally lit up. People are having a good time, and the vibes and the energy of it all are fantastic. And I've never experienced it, only heard it on TV, but hearing Irish fans singing Fields of Athenry would be absolutely incredible in a venue like Murrayfield, which is one of these, it's these classic, it's a 40, the renovations were about 30 years ago, but it's got the enclosed, it's open in the middle, but the roof just bangs the sound back down, and Flower Scotland and all that. It would be it would have been a fantastic scene. Of course, Dublin, the Aviva would be something else. The home games in Ireland are always, there's so much passion in those. It's Ireland's great moment. It is the truly island national sport, as bizarre as that sounds.
Hey, tops in the world at times here in the last couple of years.
GAA obviously a big deal over there too. But when Ireland comes now, Ireland has become in terms of rugby, has become a big deal, and so that would have been a great place to be. But you had to come home and come host with me, so I appreciate you sacrificing.
But it's a good preamble to get people excited for Rugby Sevens, because here, of course, that's about as close as we get to awesome rugby vibes. And it is awesome rugby vibes. February 21st to 23rd at BC Place. Grab your friends and soak up some of this rugby atmosphere that we're just talking about. 12 women's teams, 15 men's teams, and both Canadian squads obviously taking to the pitch here during the 3 full days of jam-packed rugby and partying. Single day tickets are on sale now, starting from $50. Get in on that. You can also get the VIP experience from $145 a day. That's the best seats in the house. That's player access. That's a private bar and 2 exclusive lounges for access. In-seat food and beverage service as well. So you'll be looking pretty highfalutin if you go with the VIP. Go check it out. Tickets are on sale now at vansevens.com. Never a bad idea to take in all that. And a big reminder, too, in terms of festive party atmospheres. International sports galore here. Yeah. And I'll admit I'm getting mildly excited about the Four Nations face-off with all this practice talk and who's playing with who. Yeah. But the Daily Face-Off live crew is hitting the road and going live on location from Four Nations. Exclusive coverage straight from the tournament, February 10th to 20th. They've got live shows every day, breaking down the biggest stories and the key matchups and all that. And they'll be watching some of the league's best players going head-to-head, of course. So don't miss a second. Subscribe to Daily Face-Off on YouTube and follow all the social platforms to stay fully locked in, and they'll be bringing you all the insider analysis, on-the-ground coverage. Little chaos, perhaps. Maybe some NHL trades get mixed in there, so there'll be live reaction to all that. But the international hockey is what it's all about. Daily Face-Off live on location from Four Nations, February 10th to 20th. Patrick, a pleasure. Thanks for doing this. And a reminder to all, we are back on Thursday to recap Canada versus Sweden, Canada versus Pettersson, if you will. We'll see how he does. And we'll have a show on Friday as well, Thursday and Friday, because we'll be getting you set then at that point for Canada versus the Americans. The winner gets North America. Can we do that, PJ? Is that breaking geopolitical rules here? But I think that would. No. I think we should do it.
I don't want that at all.
The 11th province or 51st state will be settled on the ice. I like it. Don't forget to subscribe, to like us, and our YouTube channel as well. Tell your friends, support all our fabulous sponsors. Keep it local. Again, we'll talk to you Thursday, folks. See ya.